Enjoy the show. Play on my channel.
The Great Media Comic Con, the thing I loved about it, even when Mark suggested it at one of the end meetings we had last year about working a partnership with the Media Theater to first time in 30 years playing a movie in that theater.
That's amazing.
That's really wow, you know.
And then Q&A with Back to the Future's Claudia Wells.
Right.
Like,
Claudia Wells is going to be there.
How do you
Q&A
how do you get
at
better
the
than
Media
that?
Theater. I mean,
You add in a little bit of Delco the movie. That's how you get better than that, because the world
Right?
premiere trailer of Delco the movie right here in Delco. You can't get much more Delco with this movie than that.
I mean, that was the whole thing. Like because, I kind of brought the two entities together. I was a guest at the Great Media Comic Con last year.
Mhm.
And knew no one, and met Mark and Chris and you guys and all the organizers last year. And then, of course, with Delco the movie, I'm an actor and a producer on that film, but Chris Pierdomenico and I have been friends and collaborators. I think it's been 13 years now. So we started working on the crowdfunding for Delco the movie right around the time last year when I got booked at the Great Media Comic Con. And I remember mentioning it to Chris Pierdomenico, like, hey, I'm a guest at the Media Comic Con. Have you heard of this? And he hadn't even heard of it yet, right? Because it was the first year and word was just getting out. And he was already booked somewhere else that weekend. So he did not actually make it to the Great Media Comic Con. Flash forward all these months later, we've done the crowdfunding. We're 75% through production. And of course, the Great Media Comic Con is back this year, bigger and better than ever. And I was just like, I've got these, what was it? Chocolate and peanut butter go great together. I was like, Great Media Comic Con and Delco the movie. I mean, it just makes sense.
Sure.
So I had approached Mark about doing panels this year at the Comic Con and kind of approached that idea of Delco the movie being the lead-off panel on Saturday morning. And then I forget exactly how Mark and I were having coffee, and I think I was just like, what if? And he was like, oh my gosh, that would be amazing, like absolutely, So reached out to Chris Pierdomenico right then and there, like, what about this? What do you think about this? I'm like, and it's the Back to the Future event, and Claudia Wells is going to be there, and then we're going to ask her to be on this voiceover panel that we're having that weekend. Then we're going to do the Delco the movie panel, and Chris went, well, J.J. Cohen, who was in the Back to the Future movies with Claudia, is making an appearance in Delco the movie.
He has that kind of delivery, which is great.
Right?
you do a good Chris.
Thank you. So, so in Chris's mind, it was already a done deal. I mean, it was so synchronous. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the word I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
There was so much synchronicity around the Great Media Comic Con and Delco the movie, that it just made total sense. And then when Chris brought the Back to the Future connection in there, and it just full circle moment for all of us, really, and just really excited to be able to be a part of both of these entities and involved in kind of making that connection. It's something personally that I really love doing, is connecting people and projects, because we all rise together, right?
Yeah.
It's also one of my biggest pet peeves in business and networking. And after 20 some years in Hollywood, but it happens everywhere. It happens. It's happening here and whatnot. But when you're good people and you're networking, right? And good people introduce good people so that we can all work together. Mm-hmm. But there's still like a protocol and a professionalism, right? When sharing contacts and networks, you don't want to cut the person out that did the intro or go around anyone's back to make your own plans. And so I've really strived my whole career to make sure that I'm working and collaborating with people who have each other's backs and are professional and are, and get it, right? Because we're all in this together. And collaboration is really community. Community is just something that's always been really important to me.
Well, it's passion and community, really, because that's what really makes up the indie scene. I've
Yeah.
found, and we were just talking to La Crema from the AAW event that you absolutely love, Tony. We had him on. Love him. I gotta tell you, the podcast I did with him was
Yeah.
amazing. It was amazing.
Okay.
It was
So,
electrifying. Chris
funny
Bristow
story.
actually came with it because then I had the thought of your social media post, your story, I think it was, because I saw it several times through my day. I was like right there in the corner, and I was like, okay, there's Tony, and there's Leah. Chris did that on purpose. 100%.
Really?
Placement.
Okay.
I know
right.
business partner
Uh-huh.
to a T. He did that on purpose. I don't even have to talk to him. And I know.
And now for
this is
people that
exactly
are
why
watching,
I am placing the people here. Go ahead.
people that are watching right now, they're like, "What the heck are they talking about?" So we were at the Atlantic All Star Wrestling match a couple weeks back. They are a sponsor of both the Great Media Comic Con and Delco the Movie. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And so myself and Chris were invited to come down to the match. I brought my boyfriend and his children, and I
Very
am
nice
seated.
guy, I must say. Loved
Thank
him.
you.
He was awesome.
He was a good sport. He was a good sport throughout it all, and hopefully he'll be a good sport when he watches this video. So, because this is a funny story, right? So, for those of you watching, so Chris Bristow says to take these back seats next to the announcer table. I'm not seeing anything wrong with this, but now that we're talking about it, so where I was seated was the open seat at the announcer table, which meant all the wrestlers that stopped back to talk to the announcer are going to sit in that seat. So at one point, I come back to my seat. I'd gone to the restroom or something like that. I come back to my seat, and I'm sitting there talking to my boyfriend, kind of looking to the side, and there's just this butt, like this scantily clad wrestler butt just behind my shoulder, and I had to. I mean, literally, almost touching me, and
the champ,
had to.
I can tell you this. I don't even have to talk to the champ. I know he would want you to take that picture, and he did probably want you to take it.
So here's the funny thing. He reached out and sent me a message after I posted that on Facebook. I posted that selfie on Facebook. Long story short, he reached out, just mentioned that we had a mutual friends in common and whatnot. But I had to apologize. I was like, "Oh, sorry about posting your butt all over social media today." He was good about it. He said no problem.
Oh, man, he's a good sport. He's a good sport, and you know what? He probably liked it because he was like, oh, "Look at this actress. She's posting my butt on Facebook. Literally."
Well, I mean, but the comments on my page, they were all, mostly women, mostly girlfriends, and they were all like, "Oh my God, who's farting on your shoulder?" Nobody, they weren't bad comments, but they also weren't positive comments. They were all very much comical. It was a very comical post.
And that's the best part about this story that I like is after talking with Tony, I know that he's of the same kind of mind of building people up. Chris and I made that the motto and the mantra of our company way back 6 years ago going on 6 years ago when we formed it. And I see that in a lot of great people that I'm having on the show is that they all have that mindset of, hey man, we all build each other up here because that's how we're all going to go forward and upward.
Yeah. So what are you guys going to be doing at the Comic-Con this year?
I'm going to be Frank Percy. Whenever he walks away, people walk up and they're like, "Oh my God, your artwork is so great."
Are you literally cosplaying as Frank Percy?
No, I'm going to be me, and he's going to walk
away.
You,
but when he walks away, you're just
yeah.
And people are going to walk up, and they're going to be like, "Oh my God, I love your artwork."
Don't you have an author picture on some of your books and things? I mean, don't you have there's got to be a photo of you somewhere at your booth? No?
Just me.
You might want to do that, Frank.
I got to tell you.
You might want to put a business card photo or something so that he can't get away with it.
Hundreds of, I'm going to say at least 1,000 people think that I'm Frank Percy. After at least two Comic-Cons. And these are big cons. At least 1,000 people think I'm Frank Percy. At least to this point. After Great Media Comic-Con, probably tack on a couple hundred. I figure it.
Yeah, at least.
There.
I mean, maybe another 1,000.
Like at one point he was just like, all right, Matt, I'm going off to get some autographs. And he was just gone. And I had this one older woman, she came up to me.
I want autographs and collectibles too, I mean,
Right, of
these
course.
people are brutal. They'll just buy everything, okay?
Well, of
And
course,
leave
and a lot
nothing
of times
but
you
the
don't get to walk
windshells behind,
around.
okay? And then what do I got? Nothing, So I got to get out there and, I got to bump some elbows and I got to get my shit,
So
So,
he went out for autographs, and this is down at the Ocean City Comic Con, and down at the beach, there's not a lot going on. So this older
oh,
woman walks up to me, and it touched my heart, even though I still thought she probably thought I was Frank Percy. She goes, I gotta thank you for coming down here because there's not a lot going on, and the community really cares about this event, and we really appreciate you for coming down, and I want to personally thank you. And I was just like, like
Aww.
she didn't say Frank. She just said, I'm glad you're here. She
Oh, it was
just
probably a blanket statement that she said to everybody, but she meant every word. And I was just like,
Yeah.
I showed up.
She
Like
did leave
that's
a
it.
hotel user of hers. Okay, so hey, that's all right. It's like, hey, you want to come back later? Blah blah blah. Yada. She didn't say that. She said, "Thank you for coming."
Exactly.
Anybody,
Absolutely.
no problem.
Absolutely. Whether she thought you were Frank or not, and that's, I think, I mean, speaking of like the Comic-Con circuit and whatnot, that's the great thing about Comic-Cons and about the nerd and geekdoms in general. My first experience at a Comic-Con ever was the granddaddy of all Comic-Cons, was San Diego Comic-Con.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I had no idea
Jump
what
right
I
in the
was getting
deep end,
into.
why don't you? Jesus.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I had just right. I had just finished recording the first season of Robot Chicken, and no one knew. It was either just about to be released or had just been released, so it was not anywhere near as popular as it is right now. It was season one. We had recorded in December of 2004, that first episode that I was the first season of episodes that I was on. And so Comic-Con, I think that year used to happen in like June or July. So let's say it probably wasn't released. It was probably just about to be released. But the team behind Robot Chicken invited me down to Comic-Con in a, hey, we're going to be on this panel. Have you ever been to Comic-Con? You should come down and see it. And fill me in on how to get a professional. Oh no, I didn't. I don't even think I had a professional badge that year. I don't even know how I was even attempting to get in. Perhaps I must have. I must have had a professional badge. That's the one thing I must. That's the one thing I must have had going for me, because I had nothing else going for me. So I must have filled out the registration properly and got approved for that. I'm thinking, because or maybe it was so long ago that you could still get in on somebody else's badge. So I'm not positive if I even had my own badge. But I do know that I had $77 to my name and was like, all right, I'm going to, and I'm in LA, but I have $77 to my name at this point, and I'm going to drive down to San Diego to watch the Robot Chicken creators on this panel at Comic-Con. It sounds really cool. San Diego's only a 2-hour ride. I think their panel was at, let's say, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Normally it's a 2-hour drive. I don't know anything about Comic-Con, so I hit the road with enough time to get there for, let's say, a 2 o'clock panel.
Oh no.
The floors close, I think, at 6. I got to the parking garage at like 5:40. And I've missed the panel. Okay. I don't know what the heck is going on. I don't know where we go next, how to find anybody. All I know is that there's a Cartoon Network booth, and if I get there, maybe I'll run into somebody from the television show, somebody that I've worked with, because I just drove like 5 hours, and now what? So I do run into everybody, but at the end of the day, especially on a Friday at Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con, typically at the end of the day, everyone's off to business meetings. Everyone's off to happy hours, business happy hours, and a lot of them are private invite only kind of things. So at this point, everybody's like, hey, glad you can make it. We're off to dinner. We're off to a meeting. We're off to this. We're off to that, right? And I'm like, So long story short, I was passed off to, I was thinking about this, a group from Chicago. I guess they were like friends of a friend's. And I believe they were all involved in Devil's Due Comics. Does that still exist? Is that still a comic line out there? Devil's Due, I think, was the name of the comic line, and it was a brand new indie publishing company launching at the time. And so they took me under their wing, took me out to some parties that night, but I had no hotel. Slept on the floor of somebody's hotel room closet and drove back to LA the next day. That was my very first Comic-Con experience. Now, since then, I've spoken on many panels at Comic-Con, and I've been signing autographs at San Diego and launched some panels. Done WonderCon, Comic-Con, New York Con, a bunch of different cons. But that was my first experience. And my first panel experience was actually at San Diego Comic-Con. About 2 years later, I was invited to speak. Bonnie Burton, I don't know if you're all familiar with Bonnie Burton. She used to work for George Lucas. She used to work over at Star Wars. She's a blogger, an author, incredible lady. And so she was hosting a panel that year. Actually, she was on the panel with me. Kat was the moderator for The Most Dangerous Women of Comic-Con was the name of the panel. And I was invited to be a part of that. And it was super just like mind blowing because here I am like just baby steps into Comic-Con. And I was speaking on a panel with the likes of like Claire Kramer from Buffy and Adrienne Curry from Next Top Model and just all kinds of like really amazing strong women in the comic nerd genre. And I remember back at this point turning to some of my geekier, nerdier fandom friends and going, do I belong here? And like, we were putting together a panel called Geek Girls Create. And I started to have like this identity crisis because I'm a rocker chick. Like I'm a rock and roll hippie, peace, love. But I'll tell you first up, I've also been a nerd all my life. But when I was a nerd, it wasn't something that was a popular thing to say, right? Like,
You're a good girl. Let's put it that way. I'm sure.
I mean, I always kind of call myself like a dork, a dweeb, but definitely a nerd. I don't know that I'm a geek. I think I'm more nerdy than geeky. But I remember reaching out to a friend, and she was like, "Leah, being a geek is about being passionate." There goes that word again. Being passionate about anything. She's like, "You're passionate about rock and roll. You're passionate about your favorite 80s bands." She goes, "You geek out on that stuff." And I was like, "Oh, I get it," And I was like, "All right. I will sit up here with my rock and roll shirt on the geeky panel, because that's okay." And so it's a really interesting, back to that community world, is that like everybody embraces you, right? Everybody embraces you.
Well,
And
that's beautiful
do your
statement
best.
on
Yeah.
you because I have to say it now. Frank's smiling because I just said it yesterday. I'm going to say it again today. The definition of a projanger. A projanger is a word that Chris created to make this company because it's smart marketing. Google search, there's nothing. That's the name of the company. That's where projangers came from, projangers and wall hangers. So,
And the definition of a projanger is?
We came up with that through our years of podcasting. So a projanger is a person or group who love or infatuated with nerd and geek culture. And the beauty of that statement is much like you're saying, you can be a nerd or a geek about anything. So ultimately the answer is 42, whatever you want it to be.
Yes, exactly. Right. But I will tell you, there are certain things that are in the nerd geek culture that, strawberry shortcake and blueberry muffin and Miss Pac-Man. I am the undeclared Miss Pac-Man champion, by the way. Like unofficial. I don't know if you guys realize this.
So I don't think anybody wants to challenge you, but we will.
So since I've been back in Delco, I've been going around to random, Coco's Pizza, different pizza shops that have Miss Pac-Man games.
Rocking it.
My goal is, pretty much taking the number one spot all over Delco.
Up until that one in Brookhaven burnt down, I'm pretty sure I do remember seeing a Miss Pac-Man in there.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure I still remember seeing it burnt down. It's now like half price hot tubs and kitchens or some shit like that. But.
So Coco's Pizza has a Miss Pac-Man. Coco's in Aston. Where else? There's a few others around here. I have it written down. Obviously, all the little, the Sky Zones and things like that have them in there. There's a couple restaurants around here that have them. I'll think about it. But
I used to work with a guy who that's how he actually made money, is he would fix old arcade machines and rare ones, and he would just sell them. His entire basement, he showed me the picture, like perimeter and center, all filled with rare arcade machines. And when he needed money, he would just sell an arcade machine, and that was it. He
All right.
worked to fill the day. Old man Walt.
That's I'll have to keep contact with that because eventually my goal would be I would love to have an old school stand up. Yeah, my own Miss Pac-Man in my house. I have to have that. My own stand up Miss Pac.
Oh, I'm sure you could find something pretty easy on the line,
But I
to
want
get a
like
good
just
one.
Miss. Yeah, I want just Miss Pac-Man. Like I don't necessarily.
Mhm.
I mean, is that weird? I don't necessarily know. I want the one that has like all the different things. Like I want because I want the Miss Pac-Man branding on
It's
it.
the
So
nostalgia, and that nostalgia factor ties into your memories, and you remember all those times. Oh my God, I had so many good times on this game. It doesn't have good, graphics. It was a simple game. It's easy to have decent gameplay, but even today, you will still get hooked. If you dive into Miss
absolutely.
Pac-Man or Pac-Man, you're going to keep going. It was a punishing game.
I mean, there's quite a lot of levels, and then the colors change and the speeds change, and actually, and I don't even know this. It was actually my boyfriend that, when looking into this, that there are rules as to which way the ghosts can actually turn. So if you and I haven't, because personally I think it's messing with my like mojo, but if you can memorize which ghosts go which way, it's going to help you. Like let's say Inky can only go to the left or right, and like Blinky can only go forward, and Pinky can only go backwards. Like there's certain rules to how the ghost can travel, and I never knew that.
I never even thought of that. But it's funny you mentioned Miss Pac-Man, because and one of my previous podcasts, Triforce podcast, I did with Chris. I had this popular segment called I thought it was popular. I called it the end credit, or the end segment. And in the end segment, I tried this thing to where I would explore deeper into a topic. And one thing I dove deeper into, rather, was females in gaming. Because right now, female streamers, there's female pro gamers. Whoever would have
Oh my God, of
thought
course.
we would have that in our lifetime? But there are people that
What?
get paid to
Well,
play
I
video
mean-
games. And
Oh, well, that's kind of crazy.
and
that
here's
you can
the
like
thing.
play
It
video games all day
all
long.
started with a slice of pizza, because that's how Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man came to being. They took a slice out of the pizza and they thought, oh, that's brilliant. So
Is that a true story?
yeah, 100%. It's filling in that history of how did we get here? Well, Ms. Pac-Man was a very, very popular arcade console, and everybody would go to the arcades. Brothers would go with their sisters, and they'd go down and spend their afternoons in the arcades. And you'd actually have this thing called outside. You'd go there, you'd spend time in it, you'd put your feet in the grass, touch the ground, enjoy the sun. Not for a spirit bomb. You just, oh man, isn't this great?
I don't know what decade you all are from. I'm thinking Frank. Are you both from Delco as well? Have you been in Delco all your lives?
I am the only person that is born and raised in Delco. I had a little time out there in Chester County. This is the crazy part, is because Chris works at Oxford area high school. That was where that's where I graduated, technically. And now
Chris and I both graduated from Sun Valley High School just years later, and I had come. I'd come to town.
I think I mentioned this to you at the wrestling event. Is Chris and I were in the same Cub Scout group?
Yes. You mentioned that.
So weird.
And like that's just super bizarre, right? Like how all of this connects. I had come back from LA about 10 years ago. I guess it was 12 years ago, and I had noticed that I was producing a web series called On the Road with Leah, and it was more of like a docu-style vlog back in the Sony flip cam era. So I never went anywhere without my Sony flip cam, and I would just stick it in people's faces and call it a show. But it's on IMDb and everything. It was a real show with credits. I was the producer, the director, the actor, the host, the booking agent, the editor.
Oh, it sounds a lot like my credits.
But but I did 100 episodes of it. And that's actually how Chris Pierdomenico and I met. there was a posting. I want to say it was Craigslist. So, this is, I want to say like 2012, 2013. Maybe it was
Back a
towards
bit.
the end of Craigslist's era.
Okay.
I mean, Craigslist's still around, but I mean, nothing's, yeah. Anyway, it was the end of maybe legitimacy over on Craigslist.
There we
And
go.
I saw this casting that was happening at Sun Center Studios. And Sun Center Studios wasn't even open yet. And I don't know
Played
if Chris had
soccer
told you.
there back in the day.
Yeah, and I don't know if Chris told you the story, but he had randomly met the owner of Sun Center at a meeting, and this is how they got the space to be able to hold these auditions. And I went over there under the guise of, I said, hey, I'm in town, and, I see you guys just graduated from Sun Valley High School. I'm an alumni. I'm in Los Angeles. I'm a producer. I'm an actor. And, this looks really interesting. I do this interview, this series. I'll come over and interview you guys. So they invited me over and got to talking with them. Come to find out, it was a web series that they were looking to produce. It was going to be a pilot episode. And so Sun Center allowed us to shoot this pilot. We were actually the first thing, I think, that actually shot at Sun Center before it was officially open. And I ended up coming on board. It was a non-union pilot that they were doing. And I've been a proud union member since 2004. Robot Chicken was actually my Taft-Hartley into the union. And I said, they asked me to produce, and I said, I would love to come on board, but you've got to make it SAG. Like, I really just only, even, and I could produce a non-union project. That's not necessarily against any sort of rules and regulations, but still, I would rather it be a SAG project. And so they did. They went through the process, and we produced this pilot, and it was such a big deal because it was a non-union thing turned union that SAG Philly came down to set and took some pictures and featured us, in their magazine. And that project didn't go anywhere. But Chris and I have remained friends and collaborators ever since. So it was really nice to be able to full circle come back to that with Delco the movie. And then another weird connection going back to the Atlantic All-Star Wrestling. Literally, how Facebook pops up the memories of like what happened on this day?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Chris and I had already been joking about the wrestling thing. Like what? Like all of a sudden, Chris Bristow invites us to the wrestling, right? And me and Chris Pierdomenico are like, okay, this is really weird because the last time we did a project together, we were invited down to this space in Philadelphia where they were having a wrestling match, and they invited Chris and I to get up and speak about this project. So that was weird enough.
God.
That's weird enough as it was, but 3 days before we went to the Atlantic All-Star Wrestling match, my Facebook memories popped up, and it was me and Chris Pierdomenico in a wrestling ring, like literally almost 13 years to the date.
Oh my God, that is so weird.
I mean, don't know why.
I'm gonna call it a good omen. I think it's a good omen because it's the time. Because Delco has been like, it used to be like, oh, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Delco, and people, oh, you're from Delaware? Like, no, we're not Delaware. Ew.
I mean, also like in LA for the most part, I'd say Philly, unless somebody would be like, and I was born and raised in Philly. I moved to Delco when I was 10, so I still claim Philly as like my birthplace. But Delco is where I grew up and where I currently am right now.
I was
making
born
a
and
movie
raised
about,
in Delco. I still claim Philly when I'm outside of this place. I'm like, oh, where are you from? Oh, Philly. Oh, okay. Just outside. That's when they go, oh, where in? I'm like, oh, just outside. Oh, okay, where? Close to Chester. All right. And they walk away. That's it.
I always say like 10, 15 minutes south of the Philly airport. That's, that's usually good enough for people.
That's probably better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you give them Philly airport.
I'm in Parkside. So that's like,
well,
you're right there.
5 minutes.
Oh, I see you.
Yeah.
That's where the hood is. It's over there. Okay.
Yeah, I can't claim that yet. I can't. It's just something. There are nice
parts.
Where are you from, Frank? Did you
New York City. I'm a New Yorker.
Okay, are you in New York right now?
No, I'm in Delco.
Why? I'm kidding.
I couldn't afford the crappy slum I grew up in, So I came out here.
Oh yeah, it's still the same slum. It's just they just made it more expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I moved out to Philly, and 22 years now.
There we go.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Frank used to work for Marvel, and DC is in comics and stuff. So that I met Frank through Mark. I met Mark. Jesus, it was Frank and Mark about like 4 years ago now. We did a live. Oh, stop it! I don't want to feel old. That's fine. It was 4 years ago.
Wait,
Everything's
Go
4
ahead.
years ago. At a certain point in my mind, it's just like, it was 4 years ago. That's enough. I don't. It was probably longer ago than that, but
It's crazy. Yeah,
it
it's
was.
crazy how time flies.
I know when I met Frank is about 4 years ago because it was pre-COVID, right before the lockdown, and
So it's like
he
possibly
was
4.5
he and
at this
Mark
point.
were throwing together a Comic-Con. We were going to be at the Comic-Con. It was like, we're a podcast. This is our first thing. Like, we're at a Comic-Con. This is big. And then COVID just said, no, we're not doing that.
Yep, to a lot of us, to a lot of things. Yes, I remember now talking to Mark that yes, this was in the works, and then it got delayed.
That's where my friendship and even this podcast came from, because it started off with Frank asking me, like, hey, come grab lunch with me. And then, hey, I want you to do the video for my Kickstarter, for my comic. Okay. And then it evolved from there. I latched on to be able to write the backstory, the annual for his comic. And from there, it's just the bug keeps rolling and all these opportunities keep coming, especially we're now 4 local wrestling leagues deep at Projangers and Wall Hangers. The CPW, the AAW, Orichi Wrestling, Super Crazy Wrestling. Chris is going full forward there, and they want me to be their camera guy, so I'm there.
Hey,
Very cool, very cool.
So we have a lot of steps going forward, but it's that thing you're talking about of meeting the friends and then evolving something with these people, because that's one thing I love to impart on this channel is that anybody watching can do something amazing, like make a movie, be a voice of, voice actors, be able to write something, draw. Aleem Legit literally came on this podcast, and before, when I was at the Comic-Con, afterwards, he showed me, he was like, hey man, this was my artwork before I started on this comic. And I'm like, yeah, but this is your artwork now. And now he's doing coloring and all that. Like, you can evolve this core idea you think is cool into something that everybody's going to be like, oh my God, how did you do this overnight?
Absolutely. Well, right. It's always an overnight success, right? I think one of the jokes in Hollywood is like that every overnight success is at least like 15 years in the making. You just don't know, you just haven't heard of that person. You don't know all the other projects that they've been in. You don't know the struggles.
Peanut butter noodle time dinners,
Yeah.
Yeah. How many famous actors and actresses, they're like, yeah, these are these commercials you saw them in. You're like, oh my God, I remember that commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's years and years and years. And the one thing, that I come back to a lot sometimes with this industry that I've chosen to work in, especially as a performer, or anything independent, right? Gone are the days where performers are under movie studio contracts. But so for me, it always seems like there's, I moved out to Hollywood right out of grad school. I dropped out of grad school. I was going to a grad school at Westchester University, and I had lucked out, and I ended up on tour with a couple of my favorite rock bands.
Oh, I saw your IMDb. A little band people might have heard called Poison.
I mean, they're from Pennsylvania. They're Pennsylvania boys, Mechanicsburg, PA.
PA sticks together, Frank. Unlike New York guys.
Right up that way. Mm-hmm.
Oh, about 5 hours on the other side of the state. I found out where that was because when I was a mechanic, I was like, oh, there's this Toyota dealer in Mechanicsburg. They're like, dude, come in tomorrow. We will hire you. And I was like, let me Google this. And I was like, oh, you're only like 5 hours away. Like, I'm not taking that job.
But no, you're right. Like, even the whole state sticks together, right? Like anytime I would run into Ricky Rocket, he'd be like, my Philly friend, like you stick together, right? So I ended up on the road with those bands, and then, it was like, I don't know, stars in my eyes, taste of stardust, and like, okay, let's go. And I moved out to Hollywood with like no real plan, so to speak. But But what I always say is, I gave up that kind of 9 to 5 full time lifestyle to pursue because you can't have, especially in the very beginning, or at least not then. This
Mhm.
was 1999. Things are a
Yeah.
little bit different now. Everybody has side hustles. There's lots of work from home. There's lots of from remote stuff. But back then it was like, no, you couldn't take a regular job because you have to be ready at a moment's notice. And it was proven to me over and over again that the times that I was able to say yes, instead of going, oh, I can't because I have this job or this gig I have to get to, led to some of like the greatest movement, the greatest forward movements in my career. But the thought is that there's no like linear path in this career. After 5, 10, 15, 20 years in these entertainment industry career paths, in any other workplace, you would have a title raise,
Oh yeah.
a ton of promotions, a corner
Yeah.
office,
Yeah.
the biggest vacation package that the company offers because you've
Dude,
been there for so
I'd have a
long.
bonus and a plaque. I've been podcasting for over a decade. You know what I mean? I'd have at least like a month off.
Right.
Pension.
Employee of the month at least a couple
You know
times.
what I mean? Sprinkled in there.
You know,
But in that indie market, nobody. No. Oh, you did. Oh, that's good. What did you
No.
do for me now?
yeah.
So it's always what's next, right?
Yeah.
What
What's
have you done
next?
for me lately? Type of,
What are you working on next?
yeah.
Hmm.
You have to have that next
Which,
project.
yeah, and it's funny, right? Because you can get like, there was a time in my life where I might have been triggered, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
if someone was like, have you been on anything that we've seen? So sometimes I'd have a snarky response, like, but it's also like, do you walk up to a doctor and say, hey, so what was the latest operation you did? Or, do you walk up to a dentist and go,
Have you
hey,
been published in any
have you
medical
felt,
journals? I
have you done
can't.
have you done a crown today? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean? Like, or you walk into a shoe store and go, hey, have you guys won any awards for these shoes? Like, I don't know. It's just it seems it's an interesting
Yeah.
thing, right? But when you put yourself out in the public eye like that, people, you give them access, right? So that's part of being in the public eye. You give
Mhm.
people access to you, which is a blessing and a curse, right? It can be a really good thing because you want that's how you, right? That's how you grow a fan base, is because people appreciate you and what you do, and they like something about you,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But it can also be a curse because people then also think they know you maybe better than they do, right? And then there's the boundaries, that you got to set in place and be aware of, and it's an interesting life, it's an interesting journey, but it's so much fun to be creative and to
Yeah.
be constantly building and being around creative people and thinking, okay, what can we work on? Some of the greatest things I've done have been with just a group of friends who are like, hey, okay, we have a couple, let's put together a couple $1,000 and we've got this story we want to tell. Shot this little horror film in my house out in LA about 10 years back with like $5,000 and like 4 of us, and it was a SAG horror short, and we shot it in the house and we got to get all messy, and and it was lovely. Um, and that's the kinds of things that just kind of keep me going. And when I met Mark and the Comic Con team, I was so impressed. I told you my first experience is San Diego Comic Con, right? My first time speaking on a panel was San Diego Comic Con, and that's just like humongous.
Yeah.
And to be invited to come to this hometown panel, for me, it was the first time I've ever gotten to speak or be at some sort of event in my hometown. So it was really special because my whole family was there. I have 10 young nieces and nephews. 7 of them made it out, brothers, sisters, parents, high school friends. And for me, it's just really neat that my family and friends here on the East Coast can get to see what I do,
Yeah.
right? Because it's so abstract. Like, what do you do, Leah? And it's like, this is what I do. This is one of the things I do, and I had so much fun. I spent the whole day talking to people, and mostly children coming up to the table and asking about things, and a lot of boys, right? Because Robot Chicken
Hmm.
I like to say Robot Chicken's fan base, not to exclude the girls because we like potty humor too, but I like to say it's like boys ages 8 to 18 or 8 to 81 is what I say. Eight to
Yeah,
81 are
that's
kind of
fair.
like into
That's fair.
Robot
Yeah,
Chicken, you know.
that's about accurate.
So,
That's about accurate.
so yeah, so there were a lot of young friends, young kids there. My dad, oh my gosh, my dad did something so embarrassing, you guys. Um, so
What?
there was this young teenage boy, I don't know, maybe 15, 16 years old. And he had come up to my table with his friends earlier in that day and was looking at some of the photos, was thinking about buying something. And I had some freebies that I was giving out, and I gave his two younger friends, brothers, cousins, whatever they were, some of these free little cards I was signing. And he refused to take anything free from me. And he had his eye on a glossy 8 by 10 I had shot for a magazine called Cupcake Quarterly. It was a very classy pinup style, and it was a geek edition where they reached out to a bunch of different geeky, nerdy women. Um, and it was a feature, but everybody was in pinup couture, lingerie, and fun dresses and stuff. Super PG-13, but still PG-13. And so, so this young boy, and that was what he had his eye on. I could see that that was like the glossy, like the big, the big priced item on the table. And he comes back a couple hours later, and I was at the restroom or something. And when I come back, somebody said, "Oh, that young boy come back, and he's in costume now. He went back to his home and came back in full cosplay. Looked
Wow.
great, and he now has money in his hands." And he's here to buy that 8 by 10. So I
Oh,
race
that's
back to
awesome.
the table and I'm signing it for him. And my dad comes out of nowhere. And he's standing behind this kid as I'm trying to sign this autograph for him. And he's blushing a little already. I mean, he went home, he got his money, he got his costume. And my dad standing behind him. My dad goes, "She's pretty cute, isn't she?" Turns
There
around
you go.
and my dad's like, "That's my daughter." And then the kid like runs away. And I'm like, "Oh my God," right? And so my sisters and my mom are outside with all the kids. And I forget if it was my mom or my sister, but the next time I saw one of them, I went, "You are not going to believe what dad just did." And they went, "Oh no, he came outside and already told everybody. He was really proud."
Well, that's a good story. I like that. That's pretty cool.
Right?
Hey,
It's cute.
That is a
let something
great.
like that fly away. That's impossible. But yeah, that's pretty cool.
I love the
That's
kid
really
came back. He was like, "Oh no, I have money. I've been saving. And I can. This is the purchase." And then to just get mortified, be like, "I gotta go."
And her dad, like it wasn't like just some random dude, but this dude's like, that's my daughter. So like now he's like, oh my gosh, that's her dad.
I feel that kid may have been able to handle a random guy, but like, that's my daughter. He's like, "I gotta leave now."
Yeah.
too
That
funny.
poor
So
kid.
yeah,
Let's
but
see if he comes
dad
back this year.
yeah, dads are gonna be dads. And again,
All
it was so amazing to be able to have my dad, my mom, my family there. Hopefully, I mean, I'm sure they're gonna come back this year. And speaking of, my whole family has not my whole family, but a lot of them have been getting involved in Delco the movie. My young niece and sister were background on one shoot day so far,
Oh,
and my niece got a little featured spot. She happened to be they just picked a great day to come to set. They were one of only 2 or 3 background the other day. It was mostly, focusing on our leads when we shot at Wawa. And so my 11-year-old niece had hope, we'll see if she makes it off the cutting room floor.
right.
But
Yeah.
she had a great day on set, and she had like a super featured little spot, like grabbing a candy bar at the Wawa. And then my dad also was a background on the day that we shot at Tom Jones, and Dad got a featured little spot
oh,
as the short order cook
Oh, that's
at
great.
Tom Jones.
That's
Yeah,
wow.
great. Oh, I love
yeah.
that.
So that's really nice too, because it's I've been in this industry for almost 25 years now, but for the most part, everything I've done has been 3,000 miles away. And yeah, sure, there's some things on Amazon that my family watches, but they really rarely I've gotten to be there in person in action. I think the only other time I can think of two other times was I was producing a play out in LA. I was producing and directing and starring in it and choreographing it. Yeah, one of those again. And my sister flew out to help out. And then about 10 years or so ago, we had a premiere of a documentary that I produced called Remember the Sultana. And that's with Sean Astin as the narrator of that, executive producer. We have Jim Michaels from Supernatural, Jim Beaver, Bob Bergen, a bunch of notable names are in the voiceover cast. And we premiered it in Memphis. So my parents drove down from Delco down to Memphis about 5, 6 years ago and got to meet everyone and got to be at the screening. And yeah.
Well, I'm glad. I'm very glad that your family is still very supportive of what you're doing, even though they may not be able to see it. Because one of the first things that popped up in my background check of you, I don't like to call it a background check. I usually call it research.
Oh boy.
Background check makes it seem like I'm about to ask you for a drug test too. Like, all right, you passed the background check. Guess what? No, but you are a direct descendant of Massachusetts' first governor, William Bradford, making you a daughter of the Mayflower. It doesn't get much more American than that.
Right?
Wow.
That's correct, right? Yeah, so this is on my mom's side of the family. Um, my grandfather, his mother, who I did get to meet, Mildred Bradford was her last name. She was still a Bradford. Yeah. And so Mildred was my great grandmom, and she lived with us for a short time when I was in high school. And she passed away, I want to say the early 90s, in her late 80s, early 90s. And so I actually have her documents and some books and things that she had and her notes and stuff. And it's something I really should do, but like I should apply to be officially, there is literally officially a club. Yeah, there's literally like a Daughters of the Mayflower, Descendants of the Mayflower. Clint Eastwood is one.
Shit, you're in there with Clint. Clint's in the club. Clint
Hugh
Eastwood.
Hefner.
Oh, shit.
Hugh Hefner was one.
Okay. We won't tie that
there's
one
a,
to you.
there's a bunch of notable names. Thanks. Although Robot Chicken did do their first season premiere. That was the other one I was going to mention.
Oh, yeah.
Robot Chicken did a big red carpet at the Playboy Mansion for season 1. And I've never seen anyone buy a plane ticket as quick as my brother did when he found out I had a +1.
Mhm. Wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
But hey, we were all related, right? We're all related to Governor Bradford. But yeah, so that's super cool. And then tying it back to Delco, Delco did a parade, or I guess it was maybe like the bicentennial or something. This would have been in the late 80s. And I was on a float. I don't know if it was my Girl Scout troop or if it was like the town of Aston or how it was that I was on this float, but I was Miss Delco 1620 because, you know.
Okay. Hey.
Mm-hmm.
It's a feather in the cap.
Right? You know, like all the way back. Or wait, well, 1620 would have been Columbus. When did the Pilgrims come? Like, wait a second. 1620 is that. Wait, 1620 is Columbus.
That's right.
When would the Pilgrims? That would have been the 1700s, right?
Yeah.
Hold on, we're gonna have to edit this so we don't look like super dumb here.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Wait, you're not gonna edit these parts out?
I might for posterity. It depends. I might
Okay,
actually.
hold on.
If I have
Hold
the
on,
fact, I'll cut it out. Unless it might just be funny in editing.
1620.
Okay.
So 16. So I am right about 1620. Okay.
So you meant the 17th century, because that's one
Okay.
back. So the 17th. It was just you added on a couple zeros. We're not there yet.
All
That's
right.
great.
Okay,
All right.
pretty
Anyways,
close.
but yeah. So I've always been like super interested in that, you know, and in the ancestors and, you know, where, you know, I mean, so that was a long time, you know, that side of my family has been in this country for a super long time.
Because I'm only a third generation American.
Okay.
So my
Okay.
great grandparents came here on both sides from other countries of Romania, Ukraine. Whew, skirted that bullet a bit. But it's I do find it interesting for family lineage because sometimes when you do have a family like yours, which seems very supportive, and then you see a fact like that, like, all right, they were the good ones. They weren't. They
Well,
weren't that family. Their kids out there doing this. Like,
so I mean, it's been a journey. I was going to school for psychology and elementary education. I was an honor student, all through school, and did that double major, and was looking into either going into counseling or teaching. So it's been a journey.
My brother has a master's. Yeah, he works at Elwyn. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, right. Yeah. And so, my trajectory was, along those lines. So, I'm not going to lie. No one understood, when
Mhm.
I was 25 and dropped out of grad school and drove cross country by myself,
No, you
not
would
that,
look like a crazy person.
not that they
Crazy
weren't
person. She's doing what?
right, totally right. I mean, and think about this, you guys, there was no GPS, there was no
Oh,
No.
cell phones.
yeah,
Mhm.
So
yeah.
I literally drove to Los Angeles with myself and like a MapQuest printout and a beeper.
Dude, before Waze and Google, my policy was go straight, just like my mother taught me. Just go straight,
Right. I mean,
or
and
follow
if
the
you
guy
hit
in
a
front of you,
right, exactly, you hit a detour or something, you just had to take it,
or he pulls
and
into his driveway. Which,
go
hey,
west.
who knew?
Yes. So, I'm not going to say that there hasn't been challenges because
Yeah,
there have. There's been a lot over the years. I'm not just parents, but brothers, sisters. People want you to do your best, and when
yeah.
they see, that you're out there in a career where, let's face it, it's fickle. There's no guarantee.
Mhm.
You can work as hard. You could be the most talented person out there. You could be the most hardworking person out there. You could be the most reliable, dependable person out there. And none of those are really going to guarantee, or at least not in a timeline,
Yeah.
right? There's the game of attrition, last man standing. And so if you keep at it and you keep at it and you keep at it, right, you got to succeed somewhere. But
Man or
I
bots.
think, right, Frank. But for a lot of us,
Yeah.
it's tough for family and friends who want the best for you to see you going 5, 10, 15, 20 years, um, so still pursuing this dream, um, and not having necessarily that traditional lifestyle, not necessarily having, the family and the house and
Mhm.
the picket fence
Yeah.
and
Well,
2.5 kids and all of that.
it's
But
something you have that passion for. Just like
yes,
whenever somebody would ask me anything that I was doing, like, oh, I'm going out to do this, or I'm doing a live event at a show, at a store, at a comic shop. I'm doing this. Are you getting paid for that? I would just lie.
oh my
I'd be like,
gosh, right.
yeah, absolutely, I'm getting paid. Oh, because then it makes sense in their head. They don't see.
Right.
No,
Uh,
this is
Yes,
a building block to get me forward.
that reminds me. So I think the first moment where I saw some sort of understanding from my family was when I first qualified for the first time, for SAG health insurance.
Ooh,
Because health insurance, that's a
yeah.
word that everyone understands, right? And, this is, again, we're talking 15 years ago when companies were still providing health insurance and things of that sort. Um, so it might not really be too relevant today. But I remember, once I finally, it took me about 5 years to get into SAG after, which, looking back, isn't really that whole heck of a long time, but in the moment it was forever, right? Because I'm working non-union jobs, which were minimum wage at best. um, and so when I finally got into SAG, and then the first year, so for those of you that don't know, you have to qualify every year for your SAG health insurance, and there's a minimum cap, which was one of the big issues that came up in the strike this year. There's a minimum cap that you have to hit every year, and you have to requalify every year. So I think, back then it was maybe somewhere around $15,000. You had to earn a minimum of 15,000 through union jobs. Obviously, you're not surviving on 15,000. You have other jobs, side streams, incomes, and things. But in order to get that insurance, you had to hit that base minimum.
Did they
And I
pause
just
that
remember
at all for like the COVID?
there,
Because there was
I
nothing. There wasn't any paid jobs. I don't even have to be
there
tapped
was,
into the vein
yeah,
to know that. I'm like, there wasn't anything to
there
do.
there were exceptions made and extensions and stuff made. I'm not fully in the loop because that's not even the insurance I'm using at the current moment.
There you go.
They did do they there was exceptions and things made, and
Okay.
there were payment plans made on our dues and things like that. So yes, there
Okay.
was lots of
All right.
support there, but not quite sure about the health insurance. But all that to say was when I finally qualified that very first time, I just remember like my dad and my brother like, oh, you got health insurance. Oh, that's a really good plan. Like it is. It's one of the best plans in the country, like still to this day. But it was something that they could relate to of, why is she out there working so hard? And like you said, sometimes, taking jobs for the exposure, like that's a real thing. Now it gets to a point. I had this conversation on my Facebook the other day, and I've written many blogs about this. Um, but you have to get to a point where you know your worth and you know you've done the work and you've got the resume and you don't need the experience, you need the paycheck,
Right.
right? So there gets
You
to
get
a
to that
point where it's,
point. Yeah.
yeah, you get to a point where it's like, great, now pay me.
Yeah.
And for me, that switch happened because it's also it's something challenging for a lot of artists, a lot of performers, a lot of creatives. It can sometimes be challenging to ask to be paid for something that you inherently do. It's like a talent. It's not necessarily something that you were trained
I got
for.
that.
It's just
Yeah.
something that comes natural to you.
Mhm.
And so maybe that's why it's sometimes hard because it feels easy because it's our natural ability. But, um,
You feel like a
for
bellhop. Like I brought your bags here. Like
right. Like, and now, pay me. But, you know, for me, I really hit a shift in my 30s when I started my own crowdfunding company, which is how Delco the movie came to be.
yeah.
Chris hired me for the crowdfunding portion. So greenlightyourpassionproject.com is my company for fundraising. And I noticed that I wasn't having a problem saying, no, pay me for that job because that to me is hard work. That to me isn't necessarily comes natural or pleasurable. I'm not
Mhm.
necessarily having fun. I mean, sure, all of those things.
Yeah.
But it was much, much, much easier for me to start dealing with clients and saying, this is my rate. And when they come back and go, oh, well, we're just indie and we can't, I'm like, okay, well, this is my rate. Right. And so I noticed that started to then, um, transpire and transfuse into the rest of my life. And I've had so many wonderful mentors along the way who, stress the importance of a contract, even between the best of friends. You
Oh
need a
yeah.
contract. You need expectations set. You need to know that this is what is going to happen and this is what may or may not happen. And it all needs to be in writing, just because.
Yes.
But
Oh, I'm my second
particularly,
company in on that. I co-signed that statement 100%.
Mhm,
I'm a
mhm.
second podcast network in, and I'm like, yeah, no, you gotta have that shit written down, bro. I don't
Yeah.
care if he's your best friend. Write it down.
Yeah.
And even with a contract, right? Then the other thing like is that a contract, my lights died, sorry y'all. Um, a contract is only as good as the two people who signed it as
Yeah.
well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're prepared to go to litigation and spend tons of money as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
More
back to
money.
what we started talking about at the top of the hour
Mm-hmm.
Right.
was company, community, and working with good people, right? That you
Yes.
can trust and build. To that point, friends of mine, Bonnie Gillespie and her husband Keith Johnson, they coined this term, web of trust. And so the web of trust, as they explain it, is like you picture your network and it's this big spider web. And so, you know, I meet Frank and Frank would like to do some illustration for Delco the movie. And so I make the introduction. So I've now taken a piece of my web that's connected to Frank and the piece of my web that's connected to Delco the movie, and I've kind of joined them. Now, if that relationship goes well, that's great news for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't go well, now that piece of my web is severed. It might be severed with Frank, and it might be severed with Delco, and it's severed from that connection I made. So I've always kept that analogy with me of um, I've been one that's always been like an overgiver and an oversharer, and in my youth tried to connect everyone. And I now use that analogy because you've only got so much web to give, and you've got to be sure that the folks that you're sharing it with are strengthening
Yes.
web for everyone.
Because we all have those friends. It's, man, I like you, but I would never work with you. Like, we were good
And
for
you
hanging
find
out,
out, right?
and that's it. I have my
Yep.
friends I'm good with working with, and I'm building more off of that because they know people who are like, oh, we're all the same mindset. We can all get the job done. Now, I'm also at the point to where I have a lot of projects. So those plates are spinning, and that's the indie market. You got to kind of keep all those plates spinning on the tip of the pole. But it's when you meet those people, then more opportunities come up. And that spider web is very much a very good analogy of it. And I find that too, because, even through just the beginning of this podcast, Josh Shockley, instantly, Frank knew him from the cons. He knew a plethora of people I'm still having on that know him. My favorite to mention is Injetta Anthony. He is director of Supreme Beings, which he's been shopping that one, and Creatures of Necessity out at the indie film markets. He's been winning the two amazing movies, but that's one of the people I've met, and I'll tag him again in this. I always tag him when I mention him because he is one of those people that he sees the passion. And the actress for Creatures of Necessity, she won Best Actress. She keeps winning Best Actress because she's one of those people that has no, I need another take. She has that passion behind them. And I've seen that with a lot of indie creative people. You can pick up on people's passion to when they tell you like, no, I got this. And they tell you like, that wasn't good enough. I got a better one in me. That passion really transcends, just even a person that you know as a friend. The person's passion you pick up on first, like, oh no, this is a passionate individual. They've really driven into this specific thing I picked them up on. And that's part of the projector.
You made me think of a director that I love to work with. Her name's Jen Page, and she's in Los Angeles. And we had shot this project. It was a music video, and it was guerrilla style shot at a subway station in North Hollywood, above the subway station. So really cool, like courtyard and people coming and going to the subway and whatnot. And we shot there the whole day. It was a male lead, and then I was like his co-star, and then there was a bunch of choreographed people that come in at different times dancing and stuff. And it was a very emotional scene with me in the lead, and I'm crying and whatnot. And we shoot it, and that was it. It was one day shoot. Everything was done. And the next day, I was heading out of town. I think I had to be on the road by like 10 a.m. or something. And Jen reached out that night, and she said she had looked at the footage, and she knew we could do better. And would we meet her, just her, not the whole crew and all the dancers and everything, but just me and the lead? Would we meet her again the very next morning back at the subway station and reshoot our part? And I'm so glad we did, right? Because I didn't see what she was seeing, but I saw the finished result that she got. And the fact that she was so passionate about getting the best performance out of her actors, that she would take the time to reach out and reshoot it. And I've worked with her so many times. She's incredible. She's a feature film director. Her specialty is musicals, really, is musicals and romantic comedy and stuff like that. Lots of kids and stuff in her projects these days as well. But yeah, if you ever get a chance to talk to her or work with her, she's amazing. And so that reminded me of, yes, of asking for that, extra take. Now, on the flip note, funny story, back to Robot Chicken. For the most part, most of the characters that they booked me are the like, oh my God kind of girls. And so there was this one episode that they sent me over the sides, and you don't see your characters beforehand. I don't know what these characters look like until I see the television show myself. So get the sides, and I'm reading them, and it's like, okay, she could be another oh my God girl. But she could also be like a Daria. Do you guys remember Daria from like
Yes.
Beavis and
Oh
Butthead?
my
She could
God. She was
she could
great.
totally be like a Daria and just be like a stoner kind of like kind of girl. And so I go in to record it and I do the lines like more like that. Like I kind of give it that energy.
Mhm.
And Seth Green is the director, so he's in the booth, doing the pushing the buttons. And so I give that take and he pushes the button. He's like, Leah, that's great. That's great. But we already recorded the girl that she's talking to, and she's talking like this. So you kind of have to match what she's doing. So, because they're having a conversation. So here, let me just give you a playback on the character that you're talking to. And she's like, oh my God. Da, 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 da. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, so we want you to do it like that. Like, cool.
Yeah.
So yes, good for passion and creativity and putting my homework in and coming in and showing them something. And then they were like, great. Can you do it the way you were doing it before?
So there is
Oh,
a
no.
little bit of that. I don't want to say typecasting, but well, we kind of liked how you did that before.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, because especially with a show like that, when they're casting so many things, and back then, I was one of like the only non-celebrities on the show because, the creator is a celebrity and all his friends were, coming in. So I got to meet Mila Kunis and Macaulay Culkin and Christian Slater and just coming in and out of the booth,
Yeah.
just coming in and out of the studio, the work day. They'd be like, hey, stick around. Christian Slater's coming. If you have time, you want to stick around for a couple hours, you'll get to meet Christian Slater. I was like,
got
sure,
time.
I got time.
My
No
car's
problem.
about to get booted, but you know what? I didn't need it anyway. I mean, it's Christian Slater.
No big deal. Just
Damn laundry. Who cares?
Let me know. Let me know who's going to be here tomorrow. Even though I'm not scheduled to work, I'll just come hang out.
Right.
But yeah, no. So that was just like a lot of fun to be able to be in that world. But yeah, such creative people. I mean, like Seth does so many of the characters himself. And so there were a few occasions where he jumped into the booth with me, like if we had like there was some like young boy, young girl dialogue kind of stuff. So just
That's cool.
it's
I love
really
that.
mind blowing. Yeah, it's really mind blowing some of the like caliber of people that I've got to work with on projects.
He's
From Robot
always
Chicken
seemed
to
like a good
Deadwood
guy
Cove.
from interviews
Oh,
and
for
all
sure. And
that.
he's from Philly too.
We
He's from
breed
Philly.
the great
He's from
Right.
North
of
Philly.
people.
So
Okay.
so my first meeting, I'd already booked the job. Seth's partner, Matt Senrich, who's from New York, who used to work at Wizard World magazine. Yes, do you know Matt?
No.
Okay, so Matt was an editor over at Wizard World back in, I guess, late '90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Early 2000s before he moved to LA and launched this production company with Seth. So it was Matt that I had met who had told me about this project. And so the first time that I met Seth was actually going in to record that day. And it was like, you're from Philly, so yeah, I mean, Philly peeps, Delco peeps, Pennsylvania peeps, even East Coast peeps. To
We
be honest,
link together. It's
we
weird.
do, but it even expands to the East Coast because when you're living in LA, you just gravitate and you're like, got to be from the East Coast. East Coast. Yeah, East Coast.
You can
Yeah.
tell. It's the cold.
Mhm.
The winter does something to our personalities that those sunny people don't get. It's too much vitamin D out there. They're all too happy. They're all getting proper nutrition from the sun. and we're over here, and oh, okay. I don't know if it's the
Well, and
grumpiness. I kind of think it's the grumpiness.
let's not forget, cannabis has been legal for a lot longer on the West Coast too. So there's that.
A lot of factors.
That's a real factor.
A lot of different
So
factors.
what I like to say about LA when people are like down on LA or California or so much traffic or blah blah blah, even on my worst day, I can still wear flip-flops. That's just a beautiful thing.
Okay. I mean, you got me there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
I don't care what kind of day I'm having, I can still wear flip-flops and just look down at my cute little pedicure and be happy that I have flip-flops.
You do have that on us, yeah. I mean, especially in January. I dare anybody right now to just go out. Like, we had one day of 60-degree weather, and then it's like, guess what? 40s!
But you know what's weird about that, too? Because, I mean, I'm in Delco right now, and I've been here for a big stretch. So, like, I literally had to buy my first adult winter boots a couple months ago. I haven't had to buy winter boots since I was a kid. And if I really was home and needed them, I could borrow from a mom or a sister or something.
Look, I saw a grown man in Uggs, okay? A grown man in Uggs. I saw that today. Delco has all types.
It happens. There's also lots of socks and slippers running around town. But...
Yeah, which is like, wow, but hey, I know.
See, I got the hard sole slippers to where it's like, oh, maybe he's wearing actual shoes, but I don't wear those out of the house because any bit of rain and you just have wet socks.
True.
Actual shoes are needed outside. That's my policy. It has been so great to finally have you on. You've always been a lovely person when I've met you, and you've been an amazing guest. And you and Chris are welcome on this network anytime.
Thank you.
I hope for your continued success, and I really think that Delco the movie is going to be one of these cult classic launching point movies, and Chris is going to get his Delco verse. I would love for him to get a Delco verse because I think he's got this particular mind. Whenever everything I've seen of this movie, I'm just like, no, I'm in 100%.
Yes.
I'm in, and I can't wait.
Yes. He deserves this Delco verse. Are either one of you coming down on the last shoot day in Springfield?
Didn't know about it, but I do now.
I didn't know.
Yeah, well, Tuesday. Actually, a week from today is our final shoot day. So I will send you the information. I'm sure we can get you. If you are available and want to be a part, it's going to be somewhere around 8 a.m. We'll need you down there. Excuse me, and you're going to have to dress as if you're going to church in 2004.
So I will actually. I'm. That's a busy day for me.
No pressure.
I'm actually.
No pressure because. So here's the thing: if you come, you would have to commit, like, to be there and be the extra and sit in the pews and be the close. Or if you can swing by around 12. We've got Roland Deli there for the lunch. I'm pretty certain some news camera crews and stuff will show up. So if you also just want to swing by kind of around like noon when we're kind of wrapping up and handing out lunch, even just to,
I will see what I can swing by because I would love to go live on the Perjangers Network on that last day of filming. Right? Between me and Chris, we're going to make that work. I'm going to swing an audible on that one. But I'm really glad we could have you on because I really hope that this is going to be one of the best movies that makes Delco and highlights Delco to come out ever. Not just this year. No pressure.
No pressure.
Leah,
thank you. Thank you for having me. I've been trying to get on for a while. Sorry about the delays. Glad we're here. I've heard nothing but great things about you guys. I could sit and chat all night. There's so much more we can chat about. So, as it gets closer to the Comic-Con,
can't wait to
happy
see you
to
there.
come back and talk to you at the Comic-Con.
100%.
And then, of course, Back to the Future night. Oh, my gosh, yes.
Between me and Frank, we're going to be roaming around. I'm going to be going live. I'm planning on revisiting all of my guests that I've had on and, talking to everybody, making sure everybody gets an update at the con. So that weekend will be very big, and I can't wait to talk to you then.
Sure.
Awesome.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Leah Cevoli, gang.
Bye.
Thank you so much for being on. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yes.